Hey, don't touch her. The words came out before Daniel Whitmore even realized he had spoken, sharp enough to cut through the quiet hum of the street. And for a moment, everything seemed to pause. The idling engine of the black sedan, the soft flicker of a streetlight overhead, even the distant echo of footsteps along the glass-lined sidewalk. The security guard froze mid-step, his hand hovering awkwardly in the air as he looked back, confused, unsure whether to argue or obey. Daniel didn't repeat himself. He didn't have to. There was something in his voice, low, controlled, final, that made people stop. Always had. But this time, it wasn't about power. It was about what he had just seen. She lay curled against the base of the building, half-shadowed beneath the cold reflection of the tower's glass facade, a thin coat pulled tight around her shoulders like it was trying and failing to be enough. One shoe had slipped off, resting a few inches away, and her fingers were wrapped loosely around a worn canvas bag that looked like it held everything she owned. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, as if even sleep couldn't fully let her rest. Daniel stepped closer without thinking, his polished shoes quiet against the pavement, and the closer he got, the more something in his chest tightened. Not recognition yet, just a feeling, like a memory brushing past him too fast to catch. The guard cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. Sir, she's been here a few nights. We've asked her to move along. Daniel didn't respond. He was looking at her face now. The angle of it, the stillness, and then something else. A sound, barely audible, slipping out between breaths. I'm still here, don't cry. The words were soft, broken, like they belonged to a dream she couldn't escape. Daniel stopped. Completely. The world narrowed. That voice. Not loud, not strong, but familiar in a way that reached somewhere deeper than logic. He had heard it before. Late at night. Down the hall. When everything else in the house had gone quiet except for the faint hum of machines and the restless shifting of a child who couldn't find calm. His jaw tightened slightly. No, it couldn't be. He took one more step forward, the streetlight catching her face more clearly now, and this time there was no doubt. Lena Brooks. The name didn't come out loud, but it echoed just the same. 2 weeks. That's all it had been. 2 weeks since she had stood in his house, invisible in the way staff often were, moving quietly, speaking only when spoken to, existing in the background of a life she didn't belong to. 2 weeks since she had disappeared just as quietly, replaced without question, without conversation. Daniel hadn't asked why. He rarely asked about those things. That was what management was for. That was how the system worked. Efficient, clean, detached. But now she was here. Not in uniform. Not standing. Not even awake. Just surviving. The glass behind him reflected everything. The city lights, the sleek lines of the building, the silhouette of a man who owned more than he could ever need. And in that reflection, she looked even smaller, like something the world had decided not to see. The guard shifted again. You want me to call someone? Daniel finally spoke, but his voice was quieter now. No, he didn't take his eyes off her. The night air carried a faint chill, the kind that slipped under fabric and settled into bone, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel noticed it. Not because he felt cold, but because she did. He exhaled slowly, something unspoken building in the silence between one breath and the next, something unfamiliar, something that didn't fit neatly into decisions or transactions or outcomes. Something human. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he didn't walk away. Daniel did not move right away. The city kept breathing around him, cars passing in soft waves of light, distant conversations blending into a low hum. But the space between him and Lena felt sealed off, like its own quiet world. He slowly slipped off his coat, the fabric still holding the warmth of the car, and for a second he hesitated, not out of doubt, but unfamiliarity. He was not a man who paused over simple actions. He made decisions quickly, efficiently, without emotion. But this did not feel simple. Carefully, almost cautiously, he stepped closer and lowered himself just enough to drape the coat over her shoulders. The movement was gentle, deliberate, as if anything sudden might break something fragile in the air. Lena shifted slightly, her fingers tightening around the edge of the coat without waking, instinctively pulling it closer to her chest. Daniel's hand lingered for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, then withdrew. He straightened, but he did not step back. Not yet. The guard glanced at him, uncertain. Sir, you want me to bring her inside? Daniel shook his head once. No, not like this. His eyes remained on her, studying details he would have missed before. The faint discoloration on her sleeve, the careful way her bag was tucked beneath her arm, the way her shoes, though worn, had been cleaned as best as possible. There was dignity there, quiet, unspoken, the kind that did not ask to be seen, but existed anyway. A gust of wind slipped through the street, brushing against the glass behind them, and Lena stirred again. This time, her lips parted just enough for another whisper to escape. It is okay. I am right here. Daniel's chest tightened. The words were not meant for him. They never had been. They belonged to someone else. A memory surfaced without permission, sharp and immediate. A dim hallway. The soft glow of a nightlight. A small room where silence never lasted long. His son sitting on the floor, hands pressed over his ears, the world too loud, too overwhelming, too much. And then Lena's voice, calm and steady, cutting through the chaos not by force, but by presence. She never rushed him, never raised her voice. She would sit a few feet away, palms open, breathing slow, letting the moment settle instead of fighting it. Daniel had seen it once, standing just outside the doorway, watching without being noticed. He had not stepped in. He had not said anything. At the time, it had seemed like just another part of her job. Now, standing here, it felt like something else entirely. He exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting downward as something near Lena's hand caught his attention. A small notebook, edges worn, the cover slightly bent from use. It had slipped partially out of her bag, as if it had been taken out recently and never put away properly. Daniel hesitated, then crouched just enough to pick it up. The pages inside were filled. Not random notes. Not scattered thoughts. Organized. Careful. He flipped one page. Then another. Each line written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Timings. Observations. Small details most people would overlook. Avoid sudden noise before breakfast. He responds better to lower lights after 5 in the evening. When he cannot speak, watch. His hands. They tell you first. Daniel's fingers stilled on the page. This was not a maid's checklist. This was something else. Something patient. Something learned through attention, not instruction. He turned another page. A simple drawing. 2 small figures sitting side by side. One larger, one smaller. Between them, a single word written in soft pencil. Safe. The air felt heavier now. Not suffocating. Just full. Full of everything he had not seen. Everything he had not asked. Behind him, the guard shifted again, but this time Daniel barely registered it. His world had narrowed to the quiet evidence in his hands, and the woman asleep just inches away, the one he had allowed to disappear without a second thought. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make it impossible to ignore. He closed the notebook carefully and looked back at her, really looked this time, as if seeing her for the first time instead of the 100 times before. And in that stillness, Daniel Whitmore began to understand that the mistake had not been hers. Why was she fired? The question came out low, almost to himself, but the guard heard it anyway. There was a brief pause, the kind that carries hesitation, like the answer was not meant to be important. I do not know, sir. That came from upstairs. Management decision. Daniel's eyes did not leave Lena, but his jaw tightened slightly. Management. A clean word. A distant word. One that erased responsibility the same way it erased people. He slipped the notebook back into her bag with careful precision, making sure it rested exactly where it had been, as if even that small disruption mattered. For a moment, he simply stood there again, the city lights reflecting off the glass behind him, casting faint, fractured patterns across the sidewalk. Then Lena moved. Not much, just enough to shift the weight of her body. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, unfocused at first, like someone waking from a place deeper than sleep. She did not react right away. She just stared ahead, blinking against the brightness of the streetlight. Then her gaze found him. It took a second, maybe 2. Recognition does not always arrive instantly. But when it did, it was quiet. There was no shock, no sudden movement, just a subtle stillness, like something inside her had paused. Mr. Whitmore. Her voice was soft, rough from the cold, but steady. She did not sit up right away. She did not scramble or apologize. She simply acknowledged him, the same way she used to when passing him in the hallway, respectful, composed, contained. Daniel felt something shift again. That distance. Still there. Even now. Lena. He said her name carefully, like it carried weight he had only just realized. Another pause settled between them. Not awkward. Just heavy with things unsaid. Lena slowly pushed herself up into a seated position, the coat slipping slightly off her shoulder before she caught it and pulled it back around herself. Her fingers lingered on the fabric for a moment, as if registering it, before her eyes flicked back to him. You should not be out here this late, she said quietly. It was not concern in the way most people expressed it. It was simple, direct, almost instinctive. Daniel let out a faint breath that might have been a quiet disbelief. I could say the same to you. Lena gave the smallest nod, accepting that without argument. She glanced briefly at the building behind him, then back at the ground, as if measuring something invisible. I was just resting, she said. Not sleeping. Not staying. Resting. The choice of words did not go unnoticed. Daniel looked at her for a long second, then spoke again, this time more direct. Why did you not come back? The question landed softly, but it carried more than it sounded. Lena's expression did not change much, but something in her eyes shifted, a flicker of something deeper. Not anger. Not exactly. Something quieter. I was not asked to come back. She said it plainly. No bitterness. No emphasis. Just fact. Daniel frowned slightly. You could have reached out. Lena shook her head once, a small, controlled movement. That would not have changed the decision. Her gaze lifted to meet his fully now, steady, unflinching. When someone decides you do not belong, they usually decide before you have a chance to explain. The words were calm, but they landed with precision. Daniel felt them, more than he expected. He opened his mouth slightly, then stopped. For once, there was no immediate response waiting. Lena looked away first, her attention drifting down to her bag. She adjusted the strap, checking the contents with quiet habit, then closed it again. The notebook remained untouched. She had not even glanced at it. Your son, she said after a moment, her voice softer now, almost careful. Is he doing okay? The question caught him off guard. Not because of the words, but because of the direction. She did not ask about her job. Did not ask why. Did not ask for anything. She asked about him. About his child. Daniel hesitated, the answer sitting somewhere between truth and avoidance. He is the same. Lena nodded slowly, absorbing that without comment. But her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the coat, just enough to be noticed if you were looking. Daniel noticed. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Not empty, just unfinished. Finally, Lena shifted forward, planting her feet on the ground as if preparing to stand. Thank you for the coat, she said, already beginning to move. I will return it tomorrow. Daniel stepped forward slightly, the motion instinctive, stopping her before she could fully rise. You can keep it. Lena paused. Not fully standing. Not fully sitting. Caught somewhere in between. She looked at him again, this time with something new in her expression. Not surprise. Not gratitude. Something closer to confusion. That is not necessary, she said quietly. Daniel held her gaze. Neither is sleeping out here. The words hung in the air, not harsh, not accusing, just true. And for the first time since she had woken, Lena did not immediately respond. The silence did not break right away. It stretched between them, thin but steady, like a wire pulled tight enough to hum if touched. Lena's gaze lingered on his for a moment longer, then drifted past him to the reflection in the glass, where the city blurred into streaks of light and shadow. She shifted her weight slightly, still not fully standing, her hand resting lightly against the ground as if deciding whether to stay or leave. There are places, Daniel said finally, his voice quieter now, less certain than before. Shelters. Hotels. I can arrange something tonight. Lena listened without interrupting, her expression calm, unreadable, but not closed. When he finished, she gave a small shake of her head. That is kind, she said, choosing each word carefully. But I do not need a place for one night. Daniel's brow tightened just slightly. Then what do you need? The question came out. More direct than he intended, edged with something he had not planned. Not impatience. Something closer to urgency. Lena looked at him again, this time fully, and there was no hesitation in her answer. Stability. The words settled between them, heavier than anything said before. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just clear. Daniel did not respond right away. The concept was simple. The implication was not. Lena adjusted the coat again, pulling it closer, her fingers smoothing the fabric in small, absent motions. A room for a night is quiet, she continued softly, but morning always comes. And in the morning, you are still outside. Her voice did not break. It did not rise. It stayed level, grounded in something lived, not imagined. Daniel exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping for a brief second before returning to her. Then come back, he said. The words landed quickly, almost too quickly, like they had been waiting beneath the surface. Lena stilled. Completely. Her fingers stopped moving. Even her breathing seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. Come back to the house, Daniel continued, more measured now, as if correcting his own pace. Your position, it can be restored. Tonight. Lena did not answer. Not immediately. Her eyes searched his face, not for permission, not for reassurance, but for something else. Consistency, maybe. Truth. She had learned how to read people without them noticing. It was part of survival. Part of care. You did not ask why I left, she said after a moment. Daniel held her gaze. I am asking now. Lena studied him a second longer, then looked down at her hands. They were steady. Always steady. The vase in the study, she said quietly. The one near the window. Daniel frowned slightly, the memory vague at first, then sharpening. A broken piece of glass. A small incident. Barely worth attention at the time. It was reported as negligence, he said. Lena nodded once. Yes. Another pause. The air felt still again, but different this time, like something was about to surface. It was not negligence, she added. Daniel's expression shifted, subtle but clear. Then what was it? Lena's fingers tightened slightly against the coat, just enough to crease the fabric. Your son was overwhelmed that morning, she said. The light was too bright. The noise from the street was louder than usual. He tried to cover his ears, but the sound stayed. Daniel's chest tightened, the scene unfolding in fragments he had not been present to see. Lena continued, her voice steady, unaccusing. He reached for the closest thing. He did not understand what it was. He only knew he needed the noise to stop. Daniel's jaw set slightly. And the vase. Lena nodded. It fell. A simple statement. No embellishment. No defense. Just truth. Why did you not say that? The question came quickly now, sharper than before. Lena looked up at him again, meeting his eyes without hesitation. Because he was calm after, she said. For the first time that morning, he was breathing evenly. He was not afraid. The words landed differently. Not as explanation. As priority. Daniel felt it. Deep. And you chose to take the blame, he said, quieter now. Lena gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was easier for them to understand a mistake than him. The street seemed quieter now, the distant sounds fading into something softer, less defined. Daniel looked at her, really looked this time, and something inside him shifted again, not sudden, not loud, but undeniable. You were not supposed to be dismissed for that, he said. Lena's expression softened just slightly, not in agreement, but in acceptance of something already past. But I was. The simplicity of it left no room for argument. Daniel inhaled slowly, then stepped closer, closing the distance just enough to change the space between them. Then that decision was wrong. Lena held his gaze, and for the first time, there was something else in her eyes. Not relief. Not gratitude. Something quieter. Something cautious. And what happens when it is wrong again? She asked softly. The question did not challenge him. It did not accuse. It simply existed, waiting. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Whitmore did not have an immediate answer. Daniel did not answer right away. The question stayed where Lena had placed it, steady and unavoidable, like something that refused to be softened or redirected. The city moved on around them, headlights passing in long streaks across the glass, footsteps echoing faintly down the block, but neither of them seemed to register it. For the first time in a long time, Daniel Whitmore felt something unfamiliar press against the edges of his certainty. Not confusion. Something deeper. Accountability. He exhaled slowly, his gaze lowering. For a brief moment before returning to her. Then it does not happen again, he said, but even as the words left his mouth, they sounded incomplete. Lena heard it too. Not wrong. Just not enough. She did not challenge him. She did not need to. The silence did that on its own. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, and this time, when he spoke again, his voice was different. Less polished. More deliberate. Not because I say so, he added, quieter now. Because I will be there to see it. That landed differently. Lena's eyes shifted just slightly, studying him again, not for authority this time, but for something more difficult to measure. Presence. Consistency. She had learned, over time, that promises were easy to give when the moment was quiet. What mattered was whether they held when things were not. You were not there before, she said gently. No accusation. Just truth. Daniel nodded once. I know. The admission was simple, but it carried weight. He did not explain it away. Did not justify it. He let it stand. Lena looked at him for another second, then glanced down at the ground between them, where the faint reflection of both their silhouettes blurred together in the glass behind. Your son needs stability too, she said softly. More than anyone. Daniel's chest tightened again, but this time he did not look away. I am starting to understand that. Lena gave the smallest nod, as if acknowledging the effort, even if it had come late. She shifted her weight again, finally rising to her feet, the coat settling more securely around her shoulders as she stood. For a brief second, she seemed unsteady, not from weakness, but from the stiffness of having rested on concrete for too long. Daniel noticed. He did not reach out. He simply stayed close enough that he could, if needed. She steadied herself on her own. Always on her own. When she looked back at him, her expression had not hardened, but it had changed. It was clearer now. Defined. If I come back, she said slowly, it cannot be the same. Daniel held her gaze without hesitation. It will not be. Lena tilted her head slightly, not in doubt, but in consideration. I will not be invisible, she continued. If something is wrong, I will say it, even if it is uncomfortable. Daniel nodded. You should have been able to do that from the beginning. Lena's fingers adjusted the edge of the coat again, a small grounding motion. And I will not take responsibility for decisions that are not mine, she added. Not to protect a system that does not see him. The word him did not need clarification. Daniel understood. Completely. You will not have to, he said. This time, there was no hesitation. Lena studied him one more time, longer than before, as if weighing not just his words, but the space around them, the shift that had brought them here. The man in front of her was not the same one who had passed her in hallways without looking. But change, she knew, was not proven in moments like this. It was proven later, in smaller, quieter decisions, the kind no one else saw. And one more thing, she said. Daniel waited. I need a place that is mine, she said. Not a room that can be taken when something goes wrong. A space where I am not temporary. The words were steady, but they carried something deeper than request. They carried boundary. Daniel did not respond immediately, not because he disagreed, because he was adjusting, understanding the difference between offering help and offering stability, between giving and respecting. He nodded slowly. Then we will find that, he said. Lena held his gaze, searching for any sign of hesitation. There was none. The streetlight flickered faintly above them, casting a softer glow now, less harsh than before, and for a moment, the space between them felt different. Not resolved, not fixed, but shifted. Lena glanced once more at the building behind him, then back at him. I will come in the morning, she said quietly. Not tonight. Daniel nodded again, accepting that without question. Morning, he repeated. Lena adjusted her bag on her shoulder, pulling the strap into place with practiced ease, then took a small step back, creating just enough distance to mark the end of something and the beginning of something else. Daniel did not stop her. He did not need to. Because for the first time, she was not walking away. She was choosing how to return. The night did not follow her. It stayed behind with him. Daniel stood there longer than he needed to, watching the space Lena had just stepped out of, as if something might still be there, some trace of her presence caught in the reflection of glass and light. The coat she wore had been his, but now it no longer felt like something he had given. It felt like something that had been claimed, not by ownership, but by purpose. He exhaled slowly and turned back toward the waiting car, the door already open, the driver standing still, careful not to interrupt. Daniel slid into the seat without a word, the soft leather cool against his back, the city outside reduced to muted movement through tinted glass. Home, sir, the driver asked quietly. Daniel paused. For a brief second, the answer felt automatic. Then it did not. Yes, he said finally, but his voice carried something different now, something less certain than routine. The car pulled away smoothly, merging into the flow of late-night traffic, and Daniel leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the window as buildings passed in quiet succession. Reflections layered over reflections, lights folding into each other, and for once, he was not thinking about schedules or numbers or outcomes. He was thinking about a notebook, about steady handwriting, about a single word written in pencil. Safe. His hand moved slightly, resting against his knee, fingers tapping once, then stilling. He had built a life where everything could be measured, predicted, controlled. But none of that had prepared him for something as simple as realizing he had been absent in the moments that mattered most. The car slowed as it turned into the long private drive, the gates opening silently before them, and the house came into view, illuminated in perfect symmetry, every window glowing with controlled warmth. It looked exactly the same as it had a few hours ago. Nothing had changed, and yet something had. Daniel stepped out, the cool air brushing against him again, but it felt different here. Filtered. Managed. He walked through the front doors, the soft echo of his shoes against polished floors carrying through the open space, and almost immediately, he noticed the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The incomplete kind. "Sir," a voice came from the side. Margaret, the house manager, stood near the hallway, posture straight, expression composed. "You are back later than expected." Daniel gave a small nod, but did not slow his steps. "How is he?" Margaret hesitated just slightly. "He had difficulty settling tonight." Daniel stopped. The words were familiar, but tonight they landed differently. He turned his head toward her. "What does that mean?" Margaret adjusted her hands, choosing her words carefully. "He has been restless." The new staff attempted the usual routines, but he did not respond well. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Where is he now?" "In his room, sir." Daniel did not wait for anything else. He moved down the hallway, past the rooms that were always in order, always quiet, until he reached the door at the end. It was slightly open, just enough for a soft line of light to spill into the hall. He paused there for a second, not out of hesitation, but awareness. Then he pushed it open gently. The room was dim, the overhead lights off, a single lamp casting a muted glow across the floor. His son sat near the corner, small hands pressed tightly over his ears, rocking slightly, not violently, not loudly, just enough to show the tension that had not been released. The air felt heavy, not chaotic, just unresolved. Daniel stepped inside slowly, careful not to shift the space too quickly. "Hey," he said, his voice low, steady, but unfamiliar even to himself. The boy did not respond. His movements did not change. Daniel stopped a few feet away, remembering something without fully understanding it. Distance mattered. Presence mattered more. He did not move closer. He did not reach out. He just stayed. Seconds passed. Then a minute. The boy's breathing remained uneven, his hands still pressed tight, his world still too loud. Daniel's eyes shifted slightly, scanning the room, and that was when he noticed it. The absence. No soft voice. No quiet rhythm guiding the moment. No one sitting patiently, waiting instead of fixing. He swallowed slowly, something tightening in his chest again, but this time it was sharper. Clearer. He understood now, not in theory, not in observation, but in absence. "It is okay," Daniel said, repeating the words he had heard earlier, the ones that had slipped from Lena's lips even in sleep. His voice was careful, measured, almost uncertain. "I am right here." The words hung in the air, unfamiliar in his mouth, but real. For a brief second, nothing changed. Then, almost imperceptibly, the boy's movement slowed. Not stopped, just softened. Daniel did not move, did not push. He stayed exactly where he was, breathing slow, letting the moment unfold without forcing it. And in that quiet, in that fragile shift, Daniel realized something that could not be undone. He had not just removed a maid from his house. He had removed the one person who knew how to reach his son without breaking him. And now, standing in the space she had left behind, he understood what that absence truly meant. Daniel did not move for a long time. He stayed exactly where he was, a few feet away, his presence steady, his breathing slow, matching a rhythm he did not fully understand but trusted enough not to interrupt. The room held its quiet tension, the kind that did not explode but pressed inward, tight and constant. His son's hands were still pressed against his ears, fingers curled slightly, shoulders drawn in as if trying to make himself smaller against something unseen. Daniel watched carefully, not with the distant observation he was used to, but with attention that felt almost physical, like he was learning something in real time without words. The boy's rocking slowed again, just a fraction, then steadied into something less sharp, less urgent. It was not calm. Not yet. But it was movement in the right direction. Daniel swallowed, his throat tight, not from fear, but from the weight of realization settling deeper with every passing second. He had always believed that solutions came from action, from intervention, from doing something. But here, doing less seemed to matter more. The seconds stretched, then folded into minutes, and Daniel did not check the time. For once, time did not feel like something to manage. It felt like something to respect. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the boy lowered one hand. Not completely, just enough to let a small space open between his ear and his palm. His breathing shifted, still uneven, but no longer fighting itself. Daniel did not move, did not speak again. He let the moment hold. The lamp in the corner flickered softly, casting a warm, steady glow that softened the edges of the room, and Daniel's gaze drifted briefly to the small details he had overlooked before. A folded blanket placed neatly on the chair. A row of small objects arranged along the edge of the shelf, each one positioned with intention, not decoration. Patterns. Order. Comfort built quietly, piece by piece. He recognized it now, not because he had created it, but because someone else had. Lena. The understanding settled deeper, sharper this time. She had not just cared for his son. She had studied him, adapted to him, built a space that worked with him instead of against him. Daniel exhaled slowly, the sound barely audible, and for a moment, something close to regret moved through him. Not loud, not overwhelming, but undeniable. He had reduced her role to something replaceable. And now, standing in the absence of what she had built, he could see how irreplaceable it had been. His son shifted again, this time lowering both hands just slightly, his fingers hovering near his ears instead of pressing against them. His eyes remained downcast, focused somewhere on the floor, but his breathing continued to ease, inch by inch, like a storm losing its edge. Daniel's chest tightened again, but this time it carried something else with it. Not just realization. Responsibility. He had allowed this gap to exist. He had allowed the one person who understood this space to be removed from it. And now he was standing inside the consequence of that decision. He took a slow breath, then another, grounding himself in the same rhythm he had seen Lena use. Not copying her, but trying to understand the intention behind it. Presence without pressure. Support without control. The room stayed quiet. Not empty. Not anymore. Just quiet enough for something to shift. A few minutes later, his son's hands lowered fully, resting in his lap, his shoulders no longer pulled as tight. The rocking slowed to a gentle sway, then stilled. He did not look up, did not speak, but the tension that had filled the room began to ease, like a held breath finally released. Daniel remained where he was, not stepping forward, not closing the distance too quickly. He had learned enough, at least for now, to know that calm was not something to rush. He let the moment settle completely before he spoke again, his voice soft, careful, almost unfamiliar in its restraint. "You are okay," he said quietly. "I am right here." This time, the words did not feel borrowed. They felt understood. His son did not respond verbally, but his head tilted slightly, just enough to acknowledge the sound, the presence, the shift. It was small, easy to miss if you were not looking for it. Daniel saw it, and something inside him shifted again, not dramatic, not loud, but steady. The kind of shift that does not reverse. He stayed there a little longer, long enough for the room to feel settled, long enough for the quiet to become something safe instead of something empty. When he finally stepped back, it was slow, deliberate, making sure the change held even as he moved. At the doorway, he paused, his hand resting lightly against the frame, his gaze lingering on the small figure in the corner who was now breathing evenly, no longer fighting the world around him. The absence was still there. Lena was still not in the room, but something else had taken its place. Awareness. And it was not going anywhere. Daniel did not go far after leaving the doorway. He stopped just outside, the soft light from the room still stretching across the hallway floor. And for a moment, he simply stood there, listening. Not for noise. For absence of it. the kind that told him the tension inside had not returned. The house was quiet again, but this time it did not feel empty. It felt held together, barely, but enough. He exhaled slowly, his hand still resting against the doorframe before finally letting it fall to his side. When he turned, Margaret was still there, standing at a respectful distance, her posture unchanged but her eyes more attentive now, as if she had been waiting for something to shift. "He is settled?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded once. For now. Margaret inclined her head slightly, but she did not move. She rarely asked questions unless necessary, but something in his expression must have told her this was not routine. "Is there anything you would like adjusted for tomorrow?" she asked. The question was simple, expected, but Daniel did not answer right away. Tomorrow. The word carried weight now. Not schedule. Not agenda. Something else entirely. He glanced back once more at the door, then returned his gaze to Margaret, who made the decision to let her go. Margaret did not need clarification. She understood immediately. Her hands folded lightly in front of her. "It was processed through operations, sir. A report was filed. The recommendation came from senior staff oversight." Daniel's expression did not change much, but something in his posture sharpened, not with anger, but with focus. "Names," he said quietly. Margaret hesitated, not out of resistance, but precision. "The report was submitted by Mr. Collins. Approved by Mrs. Hargrove." Daniel nodded slowly, committing it without reaction. "And no one thought to ask me." It was not a question. Margaret held her composure. It was categorized as a routine personnel matter. Routine. The word echoed in a way it had not before. Daniel let out a slow breath, his gaze drifting briefly toward the polished floor, where the reflection of the overhead lights blurred into soft lines. Routine had removed someone essential. Routine had created absence where there should have been understanding. He looked back up. "That changes," he said. Margaret studied him for a fraction of a second, then gave a small nod. "Yes, sir." There was no elaboration. There did not need to be. She had worked in that house long enough to recognize when a statement was not temporary. Daniel turned slightly, his attention shifting toward the study down the hall. The door stood partially open, the room beyond lit with the same controlled precision as everything else in the house. He walked toward it without hurry, each step measured, the quiet sound of his shoes marking a steady rhythm against the floor. Inside, everything was exactly as it should be. Clean. Ordered. Untouched. The vase had been replaced. Identical in shape, identical in position, as if the original had never existed. Daniel stopped in front of it, his gaze settling on the glass surface that reflected nothing but perfection. For a moment, he said nothing, did nothing. Then he reached out, not to move it, not to adjust it, but simply to touch it, his fingers resting lightly against the cool surface. It felt empty, not physically, symbolically. He withdrew his hand slowly, his jaw tightening just slightly. "Remove it," he said, his voice calm but firm. Margaret, who had followed at a distance, paused. "Sir." Daniel did not look at her. "It does not belong here." Margaret inclined her head. "Of course." The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence carried intention. Not absence. Correction. Daniel turned away from the desk, his gaze moving toward the window where the city stretched out beyond the glass. Endless lights flickering in patterns that never stopped. Somewhere out there, Lena was still awake. Or maybe she had found a place to rest again, the coat still wrapped around her shoulders, the same coat he had given without understanding what it meant. Now he did. It was not help. It was not charity. It was a beginning. He reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out his phone, the screen lighting up in the dim room. For a second, his thumb hovered over the contacts, not because he did not know what to do, but because he understood now that what came next mattered more than anything he had done before. He selected a number. The line rang once, twice, then connected. "Mr. Whitmore." A voice answered, alert despite the hour. "I need a property prepared," Daniel said, his tone even, but carrying something new beneath it. Not temporary, not transitional, permanent. There was a brief pause on the other end, then a quick response. "Of course, sir." Specifications. Daniel's gaze shifted slightly, not toward anything in the room, but toward something beyond it, something he had only just begun to understand. "Somewhere quiet," he said. "Natural light. No harsh angles. And space. Enough space to breathe." Another pause, shorter this time. Understood. When do you need it ready? Daniel did not hesitate. As soon as possible. He ended the call without another word, lowering the phone slowly as the screen dimmed in his hand. The room remained still, but something had already begun to move. Not outside. Inside. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Whitmore was not reacting to a problem. He was correcting a mistake. Morning did not arrive loudly. It eased into the house the way light always did there, filtered through tall glass panels, softened by design, controlled before it could become harsh. But today, the quiet felt different. Not empty. Not mechanical. It carried something beneath it, something waiting to be seen. Daniel was already awake before the sun fully rose. He stood near the window in his study, hands resting lightly against the edge of the desk, watching the first layer of daylight stretch across the city. He had not slept much. Not because he could not, but because his mind had not returned to its usual patterns. Numbers, meetings, decisions. None of that had followed him into the night. Instead, there had been images. A coat pulled tighter around thin shoulders. A notebook filled with careful observations. A single word written in pencil. Safe. He exhaled slowly, then straightened. His posture shifting from reflection to action without losing the weight of what had settled inside him. The door behind him opened softly. Sir, Margaret's voice came, composed as always. There is someone here to see you. Daniel turned, already knowing. Not guessing. Knowing. Send her in. Margaret stepped aside, and a second later, Lena appeared at the threshold. She did not rush in. She did not hesitate either. She stepped forward with the same quiet steadiness she had always carried, her movements measured, her presence grounded. The coat was still around her shoulders. His coat, but it no longer looked borrowed. It looked placed, like it belonged where it was, at least for now. Her bag rested against her side, straps secured, everything about her composed, even after the night she had spent outside. Daniel took a step toward her, stopping at a distance that was respectful, not distant. You came, he said. Lena gave a small nod. I said I would. There was no emphasis in her voice. No need for it. She followed through because that was who she was, not because the moment required it. Daniel studied her for a brief second, then gestured slightly toward the chair across from him. Please. Lena glanced at the chair, then back at him, then took a seat without hesitation, her posture upright, her hands resting lightly in her lap. She did not lean back. She did not relax fully. Not yet. Daniel remained standing for a moment longer, then moved to sit across from her, the space between them now intentional, defined not by hierarchy, but by conversation. The room was quiet, the kind that did not press, but allowed. Daniel did not start with an apology, not because he did not have one, but because he understood now that words, without structure behind them, would not hold. The decision to let you go was wrong, he said, his voice steady, direct. Lena listened without interruption, her expression unchanged, but her attention fully present. It should not have happened without context, without understanding. He paused briefly, not searching for words, but placing them carefully. That will not happen again. Lena held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once, acknowledging the statement, not accepting it fully, but recognizing it. You said that last night, she replied softly. Daniel did not look away. And this morning, I am acting on it. That landed differently. Lena's eyes shifted slightly, just enough to show that she had heard the distinction. Action, not promise. Daniel leaned forward just slightly, his hands resting on the desk now, open, not closed. You asked for stability, he continued. Not a temporary solution. Not something that disappears when it becomes inconvenient. Lena's fingers moved subtly against the fabric of the coat, a small grounding motion, but she did not speak. Daniel reached to the side, picking up a folder that had been placed there earlier, its contents prepared before she arrived. He slid it across the desk toward her, not pushing it, just placing it within reach. Lena looked at it, then at him, then back at the folder. She opened it slowly. Inside were documents. Clean, organized, clear, not complicated, not hidden behind language designed to confuse. A lease agreement, a property description, photos, natural light through wide windows, open space, soft angles, a place that did not feel like it would close in on you. Lena's fingers paused on the page, her eyes scanning, not quickly, but carefully, absorbing each detail. It is in your name, Daniel said quietly. Not tied to employment. Not conditional. Lena did not look up right away. She kept reading, her expression steady, but something deeper moved beneath it, something that did not surface easily. You said you needed a place that was yours, Daniel added. This is that place. The room remained still, the light shifting slightly as the sun rose higher, casting a warmer tone across the desk, across the pages in front of her. Lena closed the folder slowly, her hands resting on top of it for a moment before she finally lifted her gaze to meet his. Why? She asked. The question was simple, but it carried everything. Daniel did not answer immediately. He could have said many things. Responsibility, correction, regret, but none of those would have been complete. Because you should not have had to sleep outside to be seen, he said finally, his voice low, steady, without excess. Lena held his gaze, and for the first time since she had entered the room, something in her expression shifted, not fully, not openly, but enough to show that the moment had reached somewhere deeper than words. The silence that followed was not empty. It was real, and neither of them moved to break it too quickly. The silence held longer this time. Not fragile, not uncertain, just steady, like something that had finally found its place and did not need to be rushed. Lena's hands rested on the folder, her fingers still, but not tense, as if she was feeling the weight of what had just been placed in front of her rather than simply reading it. The morning light shifted again, soft gold now, stretching across the desk and catching the edge of the papers, making them glow in a way that felt almost unreal. Daniel did not move. He did not fill the space with explanation or justification. He had said what mattered. Now he let it stand. Lena lowered her gaze once more to the folder, opening it again, this time slower, more deliberate. Her eyes moved across the pages, not searching for flaws, but for meaning. The address, the layout, the terms. Everything was clear. Nothing hidden. That alone was unusual. She reached the final page and paused, her thumb resting lightly against the corner as if deciding whether to turn it or leave it where it was. This is not small, she said quietly. It was not a rejection, not acceptance either, just an acknowledgement of scale. Daniel nodded once. It is not meant to be. Lena let out a soft breath, almost inaudible, and closed the folder again. She did not push it away. She did not pull it closer. She left it exactly where it was, between them. A choice, but not yet a decision. You are trying to fix something, she said after a moment. Daniel met her eyes. I am trying to correct something. Lena tilted her head slightly, considering the difference. Correction still comes from the same place, she replied. Power. The word was not sharp. It did not accuse. It simply existed, placed carefully between them like a truth that could not be ignored. Daniel did not react defensively. He had already moved past that instinct. Then tell me where it should come from, he said. Lena held his gaze, and for a second, there was something almost searching in her expression, as if she was deciding whether he was ready to hear the answer. From understanding, she said finally, not just of what happened, but of what it felt like. The room grew quieter, if that was possible, the kind of quiet that deepens instead of fades. Daniel leaned back slightly, absorbing that, not resisting it, not trying to reshape it into something easier. Then help me understand, he said. Lena's fingers moved again, this time not on the code, but lightly against the edge of the folder, tracing a line that did not need tracing. When I left, she began, her voice calm, measured. No one asked where I would go. No one asked if I had somewhere to be. The decision ended at the door. Daniel's chest tightened slightly, but he did not interrupt. Lena continued. I have worked in houses like this before. Places where everything is clean, ordered, controlled. But the people who keep it that way. She paused, searching for the right word, then chose not to soften it. They are temporary. Replaceable. Daniel's gaze lowered for a brief second, then returned. You were not replaceable, he said. Lena gave a small shake of her head. That is not how the system saw it. The distinction mattered. She was not arguing her value. She was defining the structure that ignored it. Daniel exhaled slowly, his hand resting against the desk, fingers pressing lightly into the surface as if grounding himself in the moment. Then the system changes, he said. Lena watched him carefully, not dismissing the statement, but not accepting it at face value either. Systems do not change because someone says they will, she replied. They change because someone is willing to stand inside them, and do something different when it is uncomfortable. The words landed with precision, not heavy, not dramatic, but exact. Daniel nodded slowly. Then, that is what I will do. Lena held his gaze a moment longer, then finally looked down at the folder again. This time, when her hand moved, it was decisive. She slid it slightly closer to herself. Not much, just enough to shift its position from neutral to considered. This place, she said quietly. It is not a gift. Daniel did not speak. He waited. If I accept it, she continued, it is because I choose stability. Not because I owe anything in return. Daniel nodded once, immediately. You would not owe anything. Lena's fingers rested flat against the cover now, steady, grounded. She lifted her gaze again, and this time there was something clearer in her expression. Not uncertainty, not resistance, something closer to alignment. Then, I will look at it, she said. It was not a yes. Not yet. But it was not a no. And in that moment, that mattered more. Daniel inclined his head slightly, accepting that boundary without pushing it further. The room remained quiet, but the silence no longer felt like something waiting to be filled. It felt like something that had already begun to change. And neither of them needed to rush what came next. The room did not rush forward after her words. It stayed exactly where it was, balanced between what had been said and what had not yet been decided. Lena's hand remained on the folder, not gripping it, not letting it go, just resting there like a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted but not settled. Daniel watched that small detail more closely than anything else in the room. Not the documents, not the outcome, the choice. That was what mattered now. He leaned back slightly in his chair, giving the space more room, not pulling away, but making it clear that he was no longer trying to control where this conversation went. For the first time, he was allowing it to exist without directing it. There is something else, he said after a moment, his voice low, steady, careful not to interrupt the balance that had formed. Lena looked up, her expression calm, attentive. The people who made that decision, he continued, they will be held accountable. Lena's gaze did not sharpen. It did not soften either. It remained steady. Accountable how? She asked. The question was not confrontational. It was precise. Daniel paused briefly, not because he did not know the answer, but because he understood now that the way he answered mattered as much as the answer itself. Not removed without thought, he said. Not replaced the same way you were. But they will not make decisions like that again. Not without understanding the impact. Lena held his gaze, searching for something deeper than the words. So they stay, she said quietly. Daniel nodded once. They stay, and they learn. Lena's fingers moved slightly against the folder, a small shift, almost reflective. That is harder, she said. Daniel's expression did not change, but something in his posture confirmed that he understood exactly what she meant. Removing someone was easy. Changing how they thought was not. It is necessary, he replied. Lena looked down. For a moment, then back at him. For them, she said. And for you. The addition landed softly, but it carried weight. Daniel did not deflect it. Yes, he said simply. The honesty did not need expansion. It was enough. The light in the room had grown warmer now, the morning fully present, filling the space with a kind of clarity that made everything feel more defined. Lena shifted slightly in her seat, not uncomfortable, but adjusting as if preparing for something that required steadiness. If I come back, she said slowly, it is not just to do the same work. Daniel did not interrupt. He let her finish. Your son does not need someone to clean around him, she continued. He needs someone who understands him. And that cannot be treated like a task. Daniel nodded, his gaze steady. I understand that now. Lena studied him for a moment, then continued. And if I am there, I will speak when something is wrong. Even if it is not convenient. Even if it is not what people want to hear. Daniel's response came without hesitation. That is exactly what needs to happen. Lena held his gaze, measuring that, not for agreement, but for consistency. She had said something similar the night before. This time, it felt different. Not because of the words. Because of how they were received. She leaned back slightly in her chair, the first time her posture had relaxed even a fraction since she entered the room. It was subtle, easy to miss, but it was there. And I will not be the only one responsible for him, she added. You will be there too. The words were not a request. They were a condition. Daniel felt that more than anything else she had said, not because it was unexpected, but because it required something he had avoided for a long time. Presence. Not occasional. Not distant. Consistent. He nodded slowly. I will be. Lena watched him closely, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath again, waiting to see if that answer would settle or fall apart. It settled. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. She looked down at the folder again, her fingers tracing its edge once more, then lifting it slightly off the desk. This time, she did not hesitate. She held it in both hands, the weight of it real. Now, not abstract. I will review this today, she said. Daniel inclined his head slightly. Take your time. Lena gave a small nod, then stood, the movement smooth, controlled, the coat shifting slightly as she adjusted it around her shoulders. She did not rush toward the door. She did not linger either. She moved with intention, the same way she always had. When she reached the threshold, she paused for just a second, her hand resting lightly against the doorframe, echoing something he had done the night before. She turned her head slightly, not fully looking back, just enough to speak without breaking the moment. He slept better when someone stayed, she said quietly. Not close. Just there. Daniel absorbed that, the instruction simple, but the meaning layered. I will remember that, he replied. Lena gave the smallest nod, then stepped out into the hallway, her presence moving with her, leaving the room quieter, but not empty. Daniel remained where he was, his gaze resting on the space she had just left, the folder no longer on the desk, the air no longer holding uncertainty. Something had changed. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to know that this time, the outcome would not be decided without understanding. And this time, he would be there to see it through. The hallway carried her footsteps softly, the sound fading into the distance until it disappeared completely, leaving behind a quiet that felt different from before. Not empty. Not waiting. Just settled. Daniel remained in the study for a moment longer, his gaze resting on the space where the folder had been, now gone, no longer something he controlled or defined. It had moved with her. That mattered. He exhaled slowly, then turned, stepping out into the hallway with a pace that was neither rushed nor delayed, but intentional. As he passed the door to his son's room, he slowed, not stopping immediately, just enough to listen. There was no sound of distress, no uneven rhythm of movement, just a soft, steady quiet that held its own shape. He stepped closer and gently pushed the door open. The room looked the same as it had earlier, but it felt different. His son was lying on the floor now, not in the corner, not withdrawn, just resting, one arm tucked beneath his head, the other relaxed at his side. The small objects along the shelf remained in place, undisturbed, their quiet order still intact. Daniel stepped inside slowly, careful not to disrupt the balance that had been rebuilt. He did not move too close. He did not speak right away. He simply sat down on the chair near the wall, the same distance Lena would have chosen, not too far, not too near. The chair creaked softly under his weight, but the sound did not break anything. It blended into the room, accepted. He rested his hands on his knees, fingers relaxed, his posture steady but not rigid. Minutes passed. He did not check his watch, did not reach for his phone. He let the moment exist without dividing it into tasks. His son shifted slightly, not startled, not tense, just aware. His eyes opened halfway, glancing toward the presence in the room, then settling again. No resistance, no retreat, just acknowledgement. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been held tight without him realizing it. I am here, he said quietly, not as instruction, not as reassurance, but as fact. The words did not need more. They were enough. The room held them gently, without echo, without pressure. His son's breathing remained even, his body still, his space respected. Daniel leaned back slightly in the chair, allowing his posture to soften, mirroring what he had seen, what he was beginning to understand. This was not about fixing, not about solving. It was about staying. The minutes stretched again, but they did not feel long. They felt complete. After a while, his son turned his head just slightly, not fully facing him, but enough to show awareness without discomfort. It was small, almost invisible, but Daniel saw it. And he stayed. Down the hall, life in the house continued quietly, staff moving with their usual precision, routines unfolding as they always had. But something within those routines had shifted, even if not yet visible to everyone. Decisions would be different now. Not louder, not dramatic, just different. In the study, The empty space on the desk remained, but it no longer felt like something missing. It felt like something that had been moved where it belonged. And outside, the city moved as it always did, unaware of the quiet changes happening within the walls of one house. Back in the room, Daniel adjusted slightly in his seat, careful, controlled, maintaining the balance he had found. He did not fill the silence. He did not interrupt it. He let it do what it needed to do. And for the first time, he understood that presence was not measured by proximity or control, but by consistency, by the willingness to remain, even when nothing was happening, even when no one was watching. His son shifted again, this time turning onto his side, his movements slow, unguarded, the tension that had once defined the space now replaced by something quieter, something more stable. Daniel watched, not as an observer, but as someone who had chosen to be part of the moment. He did not reach out. He did not need to. The distance between them was no longer a barrier. It was part of the balance. Time passed. He did not measure it. He did not need to. Because for once, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And somewhere beyond the walls of that room, Lena was holding a folder that represented more than a place to live. It represented a shift that had already begun, not because of what was given, but because of what had been understood. And inside that quiet room, Daniel Whitmore did something he had not done before. He stayed, not as a visitor, not as a solution, but as someone learning, moment by moment, how to be present in a way that could not be replaced. The afternoon light stretched long across the floor by the time Lena stepped into the small house for the first time. It was quiet in a different way than the mansion. Not controlled, not curated, just naturally still, the kind of quiet that came from space that had not been over-designed or overmanaged. The windows were wide, just as the documents had shown, letting in soft sunlight that settled gently against the walls without glare. There were no sharp corners in the layout, no heavy furniture pressing inward, no sense of being watched or contained. Lena stood just inside the doorway, her hand still resting lightly on the frame, the folder tucked under her arm, the coat still around her shoulders. She did not move right away. She let the space speak first. The air carried a faint scent of fresh wood and something clean, not chemical, not artificial. The floor beneath her feet felt steady, solid, not temporary. She took a slow breath, then stepped inside fully, the door closing softly behind her. Each step she took was measured, not cautious, but intentional, as if she was testing not just the space, but what it represented. She moved toward the window, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the frame, feeling the warmth of the sunlight against her skin. It was real, not staged, not offered for appearance. For a moment, she said nothing. There was no one there to hear her anyway. Just the quiet, the light, and the space that had been placed in her name, not attached to anything else. She set the folder down on the nearby counter, opening it again, not because she needed to reread it, but because she needed to see it here, in this place, where the words met reality. The address matched. The layout matched. But what mattered was something else entirely. She walked through the rooms slowly, one by one, noting the small details that most people would overlook. The way the light changed as she moved from one space to another. The way sound carried softly, not echoing harshly, but settling naturally. The absence of tension in the walls. She paused in the center of the main room, her arms resting loosely at her sides, her shoulders lowering just slightly, a subtle shift that might have gone unnoticed anywhere else. But here it mattered, because it meant something had eased. Back at the mansion, Daniel sat in the same chair, the same distance from his son, the rhythm of the room steady, unchanged in its quiet. He had not left. Not for meetings. Not for calls. The phone in his pocket had remained silent, not because no one had reached out, but because he had chosen not to answer. The world outside could wait. This could not. His son shifted slightly on the floor, his breathing even, his body relaxed in a way that had not been consistent before. Daniel watched, not intensely, not analyzing, just present, letting the moment exist without trying to shape it. The hours passed differently here now. Not segmented, not managed, just continuous. And in that continuity, something had begun to build. Not something visible, something felt. A pattern, a trust that did not come from instruction, but from repetition. From being there, again and again, without interruption. Lena stepped back, toward the window in the small house. her reflection faint in the glass as she looked out at the quiet street beyond. It was not a perfect place. It was not meant to be. It was a place that allowed breath, that allowed presence without pressure. She reached up slowly and slipped the coat from her shoulders, folding it carefully, her hands moving with the same quiet precision they always had. For a moment, she held it, her fingers resting against the fabric, then set it gently on the counter beside the folder. Not discarded, not returned, just placed. The light shifted again, softer now, the afternoon easing toward evening, and Lena moved to sit near the window, not in a rush, not out of habit, but because it felt right. She rested her hands in her lap, her posture relaxed, her breathing steady, and for the first time in a long time, she did not need to calculate where she would go next. She was already there. Back in the mansion, Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze still on his son, who now lay fully still, resting without tension, the small objects on the shelf undisturbed, the space holding its quiet balance. Daniel's hand rested loosely against his knee, no longer tapping, no longer searching for something to do. He had already found it. He stayed, not because he had to, because he chose to. And in that choice, something simple and profound settled into place. The house was still large, still structured, still filled with everything it had always been. But it no longer felt the same, because now, within its walls, there was something that had not been there before. Understanding. And it had not come from power. It had come from someone who had once been unseen. She had nowhere to sleep, and yet she had given someone else a place to feel safe. And in the end, that was what changed everything.